One thing so many people are trying to do is to really get out and explore the things that are in our backyards. And that includes going to the zoo. With us now, let's bring in Dennis Laidler. He is the education curator for the Potter Park Zoo in our fine city of Lansing, up at the state capitol. Dennis, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk about the zoo.
The zoo is my happy place, by the way.
Yeah, mine too.
So tell us, this is the first time we're having you on the show. Give us a back glimpse into the last year. What's it been like for you and members of the zoo?
Well, like everybody else, it's been a challenge. The zoo, due to the guidelines, was we closed to the public in mid-March, and then we opened again in early June when things eased a little bit. And during that time, obviously, we had to do a lot of changing and looking, and if we have time, we'll talk about what it means to be an accredited zoo. But accredited zoos across the United States shared the best strategies, things like which buildings maybe should be closed, how to do one-way trafficking, all those kinds of things. How often do we need to sanitize certain areas, all those kinds of things. So, and then my education team in mid-June, because schools couldn't come to us and we couldn't go to schools, we pretty much furloughed until about the start of February so that we could save our budget so that we could jump back in, anticipating that things would be getting better about now. And so that's what we've been doing.
So with that, though, at the end of the day, the animals still need to be fed. They still need to be cared for. So what was that side of the house like?
Well, again, animal welfare is our first concern for all of our animal residents here. So the animal care team, key maintenance staff, and obviously our medical team, our zoo vet and vet tech, they all were still here every day doing the things that they normally did with the animals. And then, we're learning that some animals non-human animals are very susceptible to COVID, usually not as serious with humans. But so again, there's additional protocols and PPE for our staff around certain species of the zoo also come into play.
Oh, because some of the animals can get COVID.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been such a crazy year. With that, though, we talk a lot about the mental side of this virus and the impact it's having on people. Does it have any impact on the zoo animals? Because especially for the ones that are kind of used to that human interaction to a degree.
Oh, yes, certainly. I mean, obviously, the animals are most familiar with the keepers that do their daily care and they have the most close proximity with. But yeah, zoo animals have an incredible, what we call circadian rhythm. They know when the zoo is supposed to open, when it's supposed to close. And if we do an early morning or after morning, some kind of special event, you can see they get real curious because they know this isn't how it normally happens. And so, the nice thing is when we started back up, because of restrictions and time ticketing, it wasn't like all of a sudden went from no people to a big crowd. So they had a chance, just like all of us, to sort of get their feet wet back into the normal routine.
So if we can talk a little bit, since you've been able to reopen, what has been your crowd level like? Are you seeing people come from outside of your immediate area because people are trying to go to new places and different places?
Yeah, the nice thing about Lansing, we're about an hour to 90-minute drive from about 75 or 80% of the population of Michigan. So being centrally located, the zoo's just off the freeway, so we're very easy to get to. That's an advantage for us. Obviously a lot of local people. And so the way our time ticketing works is we encourage people to get online and get their tickets time in advance, but we don't require that. Before we required it early on, before we had a little bit more ease restrictions and our numbers could be larger on site at the zoo. And the nice thing is zoos, most of what you see are outside. So that really gives us an advantage to venues. They have to do everything inside.
We're talking with Dennis Laidler. He is the education curator for the Potter Park Zoo in Lansing. With that, can we talk a little bit about fundraising and budgets? Because we know that typically zoos really rely on some of these fundraising events to help them with their bottom line. How is that looking right now for your zoo?
Accredited zoos and aquariums are each one is sort of set up differently, but yeah, obviously our gate was smaller overall because we had to be closed for a few months. The Potter Park Zoo has a partner organization, the Potter Park Zoological Society, which is the nonprofit that does the support for the zoo, the fundraising for the zoo, special events. Actually, my education team, we work for the society, not technically a county employee with the zoo, but we all work seamlessly together. So, but we have separate budgets. So the zoo itself is funded by a millage from Ingham County. And so that money is dedicated, but we also rely on a certain amount of money coming from visitors through the gate and, spending money at the zoo. So we had to make accounts for that. But because, and that's actually one of the reasons that we furloughed the education team, because we wanted to make sure that the society budget was going to be strong enough so that we had cash flow when we came back. We don't realistically, other than maybe breaking even on summer camp, the education team won't be getting some of the revenue we normally get from school programming and some of the other things that we do the earliest next fall. So we want to make sure as we're doing all this that we were in a strong position. And the support has been awesome. We have record number of zoo memberships. Even during the pandemic when we were closed, people were buying them to support the zoo.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think most of our partner zoos around Michigan and throughout the United States have found similar kinds of things.
So with that, as you start to reopen, we're coming into the spring and summer. Are those your busiest times of the year?
Yeah, typically they are. Weather's nicer. Families, kids are usually out of school, so they have more time to do those kinds of things. Our summer camp, we just Friday evening made registration available, and it's we have COVID restrictions, so our camp classes will be smaller and things like that. So they're going to fill probably pretty quickly. So we try to get the word out as equitably as we can because last summer we couldn't have zoo camp, and it's one of the popular things for a lot of families to do.
What happens at zoo camp?
What happens at zoo camp?
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing is we spend a lot of time out in the zoo. So again, but we have to do some things. It depends. We do, like a lot of zoos, we have a summer zoo camp. It's a day camp. We have it for ages as young as first grade all the way up through 7th grade. And depending on the age and what class they take, there's one called Vet Med Junior, where you sort of get a feel for what it's like to be a zoo vet. There's one grossology, so it talks about all the things that animals do and exude from their bodies that people find really gross, but why it's really cool and important and the science behind it. Lots of fun. It is, they learn a lot, but it is summer camp, so we make sure there's lots of fun.
It sounds like fun. I was like, oh, I wish you had it for adults until you said, grossology or whatever. I'm like, no, well, I'll pass on that one.
They're electives. They're not mandatory that you choose grossology.
With that, Dennis Laidler with us. He's the education curator over at Potter Park Zoo in Lansing. So many entities right now are having such a hard time hiring employees. Is the zoo experiencing the same problem right now?
A little bit, not nearly as much. Mostly it's seasonal help. Mm-hmm. We obviously, like most places, we're busier in the summer. Some things are only open during the summer, like concessions and things. So there's a little bit of that. Interestingly enough, today on either side of this, we're just finishing up all of our internship interviews for college interns that'll be working with the education department. And we've actually had a record number of internship of applications. And that's probably because last summer they weren't able to do internships. Right. And some of the degrees, depending on what they are, require internships. So it's a good position for us to be in. We have some tough decisions. We have we have more highly qualified internship applicants than we have spots to fill. So, but I was talking with some of my counterparts in other parts of the United States at some of the larger zoos throughout the Midwest, for example. and they're having a real challenge. Part of it is because traditionally municipalities would pay the actual minimum wage, and so it's requiring us to get on the stick and get wages up a little bit better. That's part of it. Our particular case, our starting wages for summer seasonals in education were already above that, and surprisingly enough, I think we were the highest in the Ohio, Michigan region. So that's an advantage. But most of our internships are unpaid. It's a great learning experience, but yeah, it's a challenge.
Always a challenge. Dennis Laidler with us here on the MegaCast. He is the education curator for Potter Park Zoo. If I've never been to that zoo, I'm looking to take my kids to something new. What makes Potter Park Zoo different?
Well, probably the most consistent comment or compliment we get from zoo visitors is how the close proximity you get to the animals. We're not the oldest zoo, but we're one of the oldest zoos in this region. And, that was one thing. COVID really put a kibosh on our, last year was our centennial. We had special centennial themed weekends planned throughout the entire summer. Ugh. So we are going to try to do a few of those scattered throughout this next year, because we did all the work to put them together. But, nothing we could do about it. But yeah, we've been around for a long time, but, I think some of our things that we're most proud of, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but our education team, which is also responsible for community engagement, and has been really, really successful in our educational programming. Zoos have evolved from menageries and collections and zoological gardens and parks, but in the last couple of decades especially, they've become centers of conservation education. And a lot of science, a lot of research, a lot of field work that is supported by zoos and aquariums throughout the world to help save species from extinction, help us do a better job of being environmentally sustainable here at home. And so that we have a program called the Big Zoo Lesson, which won a National Education Award. And the cool thing is it's an immersive learning experience. Elementary kids get to spend a full week, their class spends a full week being scientists at the zoo. They don't spend the night, but they spend every day here. They get to their home school, get on the bus, and spend the whole day with us for 5 consecutive days.
That's great.
Yeah, and there's always a trade-off in education. The more immersive and the more intense and the more hours that you're able to engage them, the fewer of those you can do. We can't do week-long experiences for every elementary class in our region, although we'd like to, just not physically possible to do that. So we do have to have a mix of different kinds of things. We still do some of the traditional get off the bus, have a field small learning trip at the zoo kind of things too, but we try to do a mix of things. We are one of the few zoos in the United States that have a high school course taught here on zoo grounds. We have about 40 juniors and seniors from about a dozen area high schools that spend 2 hours a day here every day of the school year.
So with that, Dennis, just another minute or two with you here on the MegaCast. I have to ask you, what's your favorite animal? How do you even pick and choose, though?
My answer, people think it's a cop-out answer, but I can honestly say that I've never found an animal that I couldn't find something fascinating or interesting about. And if you don't, then it probably means you don't know enough about the animal. And if we're running out of time, would you guys like to see a live animal?
Sure, absolutely. We have about 30 seconds left. What do you have?
So,
fun job.
Guy.
Wow.
He's going to do a little dance, and I'll explain what he's doing.
This is so cool.
This is this just became an X-rated show.
Oh boy.
I'm going to kneel down here so you can see him a little better.
Okay.
So this is a Eurasian Eagle Owl, one of the largest kinds of owls in the world. He is imprinted on people, and this is the breeding season, so he's getting very amorous to the people that he spends a lot of time with. He's actually hooting a lot right now, but he hoots so much this time of year he loses his voice. Every time you see his white throat patch moving, he's actually hooting.
Wow. He's beautiful.
Yeah, he's a pretty amazing animal. And he's a great example of how accredited zoos work together. He was hatched out at a research center in St. Louis, Missouri 27 years ago,
Wow.
sent as a young bird to the Cincinnati Zoo, and they used him in their outdoor flighted bird of prey shows for about 7 or 8 years. And then they sort of used other animals, and so he was living in an off-exhibit area. So 17 years ago, he came to Potter Park Zoo, and he'll spend the rest of his life with us.
Well, how old is he again?
He'll be 27 in about a week.
Wow. It's amazing. You have the coolest job.
Yeah. Kids and animals can't go wrong there.
There you go. Dennis Laidler with us. He's the education curator at Potter Park Zoo. If you're out and about, so many people right now, Tyler, are looking for new things to do with their families. And I know we have the great zoo here just down the road, but I will say when you go to different zoos, Potter Park Zoo or the Toledo Zoo, you get to help support all of these entities and the work that they're doing to help save so many of these animals and also get educated. So Dennis, thank you again for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime.
We're going to
say goodbye.
Okay. Bye, Mr. Owl.
Bye.
What's his name, by the way?
Oslo, O-S-L-O, like the capital of Norway. The Cincinnati Zoo gave him that name because this subspecies of Eurasian Eagle Owl would be found in Northern Europe in the wild.
Okay, Oslo. See you later.